Hi there. I want to make this personal because I don't know, it's possible to extrapolate from anecdotal evidence. I feel sure that it is. Even though, I'm not really giving advice exactly, merely explaining things from my own point of view. So, this outer circle represents my life situation as I perceive it, and I have sensory neurons and that transmit signals to my brain, um, and my brain makes certain assumptions and certain beliefs arise out of those assumptions. So my assumption, well, my knowledge is my past is all messed up. So here we go from life situation to messed up, and my present is all messed up. And based on my present and past, I pretty much predict that my future will be just as messed up, or even worse than the present is now. And the present actually now is a little bit better than the past, in actual fact, but it's still all messed up. And the result is that my brain chemicals have become unstable, although they probably always were. There's probably a genetic component to my unstable brain chemicals and their inability to perceive anything without distortion. That comes down from my mother's line, I think, really. So basically, here we have the cognition. We have the brain firing in all sorts of different ways and creating distortions and mania, um, um, deep depression, suicidal thoughts, obsessive compulsive behaviors, general obsessions, and the cognition is, as I say, is through a glass very dark, through a glass darkly. Now, of course, you can say, well, you can change. You can do positive thinking, and there's are techniques for that. You can do CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and all your brain chemicals can be, to an extent, regulated through these two. They can be regulated, and very successfully, I might add, through pharmaceutical drugs, and they can be regulated through illicit drugs such as heroin and cocaine. Unfortunately, of course, heroin is a deadly poison, which also cocaine is. So, and they have terrifying bad side effects as well, and of course, physical addiction leading to death. So, I mean, so we can discount illicit drugs, but certainly they would help to stabilize my brain chemistry, or certainly give me a high. Anyway, make me bear being alive. But actually, I have found that pharmaceutical drugs are really, really good. Prozac plus Integratol, a fantastic combination, really, that produces a fantastic result. There was also, I noticed, a bit of a placebo effect with these drugs as well. The very fact that I was getting any help whatsoever from anybody was great. Because I noticed, in fact, that when the talking therapy sort of subsided, I was pretty in a desperate state, because even having someone to talk to, it proves that it's not all pharmaceutical drugs. They're not sort of something that can be, just taken and that's all right, sort of thing. You do need talking therapy and CBT and all that kind of stuff, and all the positive thinking techniques and the humanist techniques and stuff that you get from Scientology and all that. Okay, so then it comes down to I mean, you could say that my brain is in chaos, and let us say that the pharmaceutical drugs bring order to the chaos. They bring me sort of balance. Because I must say that the presenting symptoms of my pathology, my psychopathology, mixed with perhaps illicit drugs as well, was apt to create a chaotic situation of highs and lows. And the Integratol, for example, has compressed these highs and lows. So, if you imagine all these, emotional highs and lows, well, the Integratol actually cuts all the highs and lows off. So it kind of flatlines your emotions. And of course the Prozac deals with the depression, the deep depression. But you see, the thing about it is interesting, because when these drugs sort of kicked in, the pharmaceutical drugs, it occurred to me that it was great that it didn't affect my sort of I am consciousness as much as I thought it was going to be. It didn't affect my creativity as much as I thought it was going to affect it. You see, and a couple of other things it didn't affect so badly, as badly as I thought. But on the other hand, it's very interesting that I kind of miss the instability, the mental instability, the kind of I am not, I am not myself, because it seems to me that being not yourself is all part of being yourself. It's just the other side of the coin. And it was interesting to note the dynamics, between the I am and the I am not, flowing one to the other and having the seed of one contained within the seed of the other, and all the sort of yin yang stuff model which it could apply here. And then, of course, what about the soul? I mean, at first I thought, well, this absolutely proves that there is no God and there's no soul. Because if pharmaceutical drugs can take away the I am not, can take away the madness and replace it with sanity, it means there can't be a soul. There can't be a soul that's in charge of my brain, at any rate, because my brain is just material neurochemicals and neuroplasticity, which have been, been brought into positivity by the pharmaceutical drugs, you see. And well, CBT hasn't helped at all. Positive thinking, waving crystals around hasn't helped at all. It had all the sort of the herbal stuff, hippie stuff didn't help at all. And of course, obviously, illicit drugs wouldn't help at all, just make me worse. So you're left only with pharmaceutical drugs, which obviously have been created to deal with this situation. Fair play to them, right? They have actually worked. So then this leads, my life situation, my cognition, I am and I am not. But the kind of mad side of me has been kind of, as I say, tamed, kind of flatlined out, which leaves my I am, which you could say, well, leaves me to be myself, the person I would be if I wasn't so messed up in my mental cognitions, you see. But I still leave. But then I thought, well, where is the soul in all this? Is the soul part of this I am consciousness? Is the soul part of the I am not consciousness, or is it both, as I've shown here, or is the soul completely transcendental, and is above all this completely? And in order to access the soul consciousness, you actually have to transcend I am and I am not in some incredibly mysterious way. And it's got nothing to do with pharmaceutical drugs, or nothing to do with the materialist view of my brain. It's got nothing to do with a sort of Cartesian view that I think, therefore I am, therefore I think. Which of course I think, therefore I am. But if you give pharmaceutical drugs to the thinking process, then it changes I am. That hasn't happened, actually. Interesting enough, not like the hippies tell you. The hippies say, "Oh, you won't be yourself anymore because the pharmaceutical drugs will make you into a zombie." It's completely untrue, by the way. Totally. It's a complete falsehood. It's gobbledygook, really. That ridiculous assertion. It's probably caused loads of people to commit suicide because they didn't go to pharmaceutical drugs for help, and they could just committed suicide. But I suppose that's natural. The hippies like it to be natural, don't they? So suicide is natural, isn't it? Like natural childbirth. What a load of gobbledygook that is. It's pharma fascism. It's natural living fascism, if you ask me. Anyway, so point is, where does this leave the soul? That's my question. Because, okay, you could say, well, I kind of wish I did have a more manic side. My dark side has been flat-lined out. So am I the flat-lined dark side, or am I the light side, that's been emphasized due to the pharmaceutical drugs? And if the pharmaceutical drugs are doing everything, which they more or less are, like 99% doing everything, where does that leave the soul? Is the soul existent or not? Is the soul in the I am consciousness or the I am not consciousness? Is the soul a ghost in the machine, or what is it? I found myself kind of vacillating really between the fact that I think pharmaceutical drugs disprove there is any soul, not that that there may be a God, but there may not be any soul. There may not be any afterlife. There may not be any reincarnation. Because the two issues are not related in any way at all. Or there could be a sort of transcendental soul, which, as I said, has nothing to do with any of this dialectic between I am and I am not, and pharmaceutical drugs and hippie remedies which don't work. The thing is that all of my life situation, it's really, really outside all of it. But then again, you see, if it's outside all of this, if the whole of this structure, all of this, like, and there's the soul completely blissfully outside this little bubble of joy and bliss and Satananda, where where does that leave the soul ontologically? Or is it merely just a moral principle? Or is it just a principle of self-referencing thought processes which exist as an algorithm, a mental algorithm in the brain, and therefore have a neurological materialist basis, you see? We don't know. The answer is we don't know. But what's more worrying, I think what's more of a problem, is how on earth would you access this soul? If it has no ontology, then that's okay, because I suppose you could say, well, deep meditation will access this self-referencing algorithm in the brain that is actually just a collection of neurological processes. It's nothing to do with any metaphysics at all. That's okay. But if it does have ontological status, if it's floating around in the brain or hovering over my head in some sort of auric fashion, how on earth would you access it with the tools that are totally based in materialism? Are the pharmaceutical drugs going to get you there? Are the illicit drugs going to get you? Are the CBT is a hippie positive thinking herbal remedies going to get you there? I don't think so, because they're all part of the dialectic. They're all part of dialectical materialism. They're all part of this model. Whereas the soul and God and heaven, and even if they're within, they don't seem to have any ontology. They don't seem to have any external existence at all, it seems to me. And yet they sort of do, and yet they could still exist, But accessing them would in fact present a huge problem of going from some sort of external existence to some kind of internal reality. And I don't see that there could possibly be an interface. So even if there's a transcendental soul, it cannot be accessed by the neurological brain as it is conceived of materially. Unless you're going to literally be able to kind of, one day they may discover the neurons that account for the soul. Maybe the neurons, maybe there is a group of neurons that actually create the ontological existence of the soul, and you can become aware of soul through firing these particular neurons in a particular sequence, which you do through meditation. But it certainly leaves metaphysics, I'm afraid, rather out in the cold, and all this ontological argument for the existence of God and soul and reincarnation and monads and angels and spirits and demons floating around the place. I can't see it myself, really. On balance, I really don't think there is a metaphysics at all. I think it is all to do with the brain, to do with neurological algorithms, to do with neuroplasticity, brain chemicals, brain chemical transmitters, neurotransmitters. And if there is a soul, it definitely has a neurotransmitter organic structure, organic ontology. And I don't see how, I don't see how it can have a metaphysical ontology. And even if it does, I don't see how that metaphysical ontology can possibly be accessed. except by something called intuition. But intuition is probably just the process of self-referencing, whereby you intuit and therefore stimulate parts of the brain which give you soul awareness, in quotation marks. So basically, either God and the soul doesn't exist, or they're completely inaccessible. That's what I'm really saying. And that's my sort of illumination, if you like, I think. And that's possibly what modern Gnosticism really amounts to, I think. Rather, we just don't think like the classical Gnostics do. We don't even think like the classical Tantrics do. We just don't think in terms of gods and demons and angels and helpers and the spirit workers and all that kind of stuff. It really, really is just metaphorical language. And there basically is no external existence attached to God or the soul.